Hey, Cam, we're
Okay,
up
yeah.
to 1957 and the presidency of the Teamsters Union. Jimmy Hoffa has been a long-term active vice president and president of his local, and really well known. But they have a president, Dave Beck, who's been the president for quite a while. It always seemed to me, I remember the headlines about him, seemed like kind of a weak guy. But Hoffa then goes for the international president's position. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about that. It's like in 1957, yeah.
You know, Hoffa believed that the leadership should rest with the presidency, and the presidency should support the locals. You know, Dave Beck felt, and prior to Hoffa, they felt that more of the strength was in the locals, and that the locals were really where the negotiating and the bargaining power were. All contracts should be negotiated at the local level. If the local's dealing with this trucking firm, then that local should have their own contract. And Jimmy felt that things have to be done on the national level in order to really carry weight. So Jimmy wanted a really, really strong presidency. And that's how he sort of campaigned, and that's why the men really, really loved him, because they saw a really strong champion, basically. And he had set up the pension. He had really boosted membership. He had the mafia. The mafia had his back. And really, at that time, if you had the executive board, the vice presidents supporting you, and the vice presidents were totally controlled by the mob. You know, you had Bill Presser with the Cleveland mob. You had I think was Roy Williams in 1957. I can't remember, but I know that
he was. Sabella had him by then.
Yeah, Sabella had
him.
Interesting
story on that is he and Sabella met each other while both sat on a Jackson County, which is what Kansas City's in, a Democratic nominating committee. There was a committee that was the Democratic local party that would meet and decide who was going to run for certain offices. And our mob boss sat on that committee with Roy Lee Williams, who was the main team, was the president of the biggest local 41 Teamsters union in the city. Also was president of a 541. So he was the big duck, and they met each other then. And it was during that time that they formed this relationship and this connection. It was probably sure it was prior to 1957.
Yeah, you know, so you've got Kansas City, Cleveland, you've got Tony Provenzano with the Genovese family. 57, I believe you had Joey Glimko in Chicago, but you also had Dorfman. So he had the mafia guys. Maybe you had McCarthy with Patriarcha. So once you've got the mob, you've got the executive board, and so you've got the presidency. So
that's an interesting thing about this. Hoffa was loved by the rank and file, but the rank and file didn't really vote, if I remember what you said before. They didn't really vote on the president, so they had an executive board made up of these Wiley Williams and a different local presidents that made up this executive board. So if you own the executive board, then they elected the president.
Right. Where that rank and file comes in, though, is for the places that are not mobbed up, sort of the outside areas. You know, you got a place like Minnesota or wherever, Arizona. You've got more of the rank and file that are supporting a guy, areas that are not mobbed up. If the rank and file there, they will lean on their vice president, and he will tend to support Jimmy Hoffa based more on his rank and file. If that makes sense. So in areas where the mob does not play in, they will have something of a voice, but not too much. I mean, the guy can. It's almost like the electoral college. They can do what they want, but there will be some say on their members.
Plus, they all love Jimmy Hoffa, so their vice president, whoever they send as a representative, he's going to represent his rank and file, and with no matter the mob, he's still going to support Hoffa because he was so well loved. It's kind of a perfect combination of personal charisma and hard work and ability on Hoffa's part, but also the mob connections too. So he left nothing to chance, did he?
No, he really covered all his bases. So you know, once Hoffa's in there, he gets to pick who's president of the locals. So you get the mob bosses get to stack all of the he stacks all of the locals with the ones that weren't already most mafia guys already controlled their locals, but all the officers are now either mobbed up or loyal to Hoffa, and he has basically gets total control of the union by putting Hoffa loyalists everywhere, and that was how Hoffa basically. I mean, it was dictatorial control. I mean, he was literally a little dictator of the union, which is why even years later, when Hoffa was eventually removed, he still had his fingers in everything in that union because he planted his people everywhere. But you had Chicago Joey Glimko as a local president. He was making 78 grand a month in payoffs from businesses for union peace. Alan Dorfman was union casualty on the board. He was also an executive. So that's two people looking out for the Chicago outfit. Kansas City with Local 41 and Joint Council 56 with Roy Lee Williams. Patriarcha had William McCarthy. You had Tony Provenzano, and you look at these areas, and each one is just mobbed up. You know, what was his Frank Rainey in Milwaukee? It was really so integrated between the mob and the Teamsters. I forget who it was in not Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, but it's really throughout my research, it was just every single place you got it controlled by. Philadelphia was Angelo Bruno, and it was really across the board. So Hoffa didn't like individuality in he wanted total control. And so as his secretary and eventual vice president, he chose an old partner of his from Detroit, Frank Fitzsimmons. And other members of the board had to answer to their respective mob bosses, but Frank Fitzsimmons would only answer to Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, Jimmy Hoffa owned Frank Fitzsimmons, you know, and Jimmy he treated him kind of bad. He sort of looked at him like an inferior. He'd yell at him in front of people, you know, you're such a dummy, and get over here, Fitz, and, you know, that kind of thing. And he knew that Fitz would always do what he was told, which in the end would kind of come back to bite him, because when Jimmy wasn't there telling him what to do, other people would step in and Fitz would do what he was told by other people.
And, you know, that's why I chose him. It's kind of like the story about why President Trump told Mike Pence that he knew he would never challenge him in any way. So,
Right.
and I think we see that every time you see them together. So he chose Fitzsimmons because he knew he could control him. I mean, you're going to be a strong central figure like that. You don't want to choose a strong guy to be, you know, next to you. You want somebody that'll do exactly what you say. And then the mob guys love that, as we'll find out later on. Fitz just like to go play golf, they tell me.
Yeah, just wanted to play golf.
They had a great big, Rancho Mirage out in California, that the Teamsters built a big fancy golf club, and Fitz was spent more time out there than he ever did in the International Association Brotherhood of Teamsters offices.
You know, and then Hoffa maintains the strengths of the pension, but while all this is going on, Hoffa he is negotiating good contracts for people, and he is keeping the locals. He doesn't. Locals are not to negotiate contracts without him. He controls every move. You want to talk about micromanaging? Hoffa does everything, and here's where you see the 1960 election. This is where the mob came in and supported John Kennedy. This is one example where you see Jimmy not falling in with the mob. The mob wanted to support. I mean, it's pretty well established. Some people may not buy into it, but you know, we know from a lot of recordings that the mob wanted to support John Kennedy for various reasons. Jimmy
in
refused to do that.
Chicago. If you
Yeah,
think about it, it was Chicago that was really big into this.
exactly.
That's all those local. It was all Democrats up there.
Hmm.
They were all owned by the mob.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's why the mob did so well and the outfit did so
yeah.
well in Chicago, because they had every
Sure.
damn politician in Cook County and surrounding counties wired up, and they were all Democrats. So I mean, they're going to have to support a Democrat, and that's kind of where you get on board there. And Hoffa,
And I,
he ever the rebel. Huh? I see in your notes here that he gave $500,000 to Richard Nixon's
yeah,
campaign.
I think the mob hoped that they could get Havana back. If you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
that's
they
kind of
did.
what
Yeah.
Joe Kennedy kind of promised to him. But
Yeah, that was part of the overall thing, that if Kennedy gets in, which we see a lot more evidence of Kennedy's effort to get Cuba back and get rid of Castro. And once you get rid of the communist government, then it's going to open up the casinos. Well, they're still trying to do that today. Open it up to get the communists out, and then they're going to open up those casinos. And believe me, those mob guys will be all over that. Man, they better come up with some good gaming control boards if they ever open up
right,
gambling in Cuba again,
Jesus,
because they'll be all over that.
so Hava did not toe the mafia line here. He did his own thing, and he had his rank and file support Nixon. And I think Nixon lost by 30,000 votes. So it looks like the mob trumped the Teamsters, but Teamsters went their own way. So that's you see where Jimmy does have an independence from the mob. He's able to tell them no for the pension board sometimes, not as maybe often as he should have, but and he goes his own way politically. So that's that independence that eventually gets him in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah. And hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
But but when John Kennedy gets elected president, and he puts Bobby Kennedy in, he becomes a huge thorn in the side of the mafia. And Jimmy Hoffa, he's probably laughing all over himself when he see those guys. He's like, "Go, yeah, see what you did? See what you did?"
Yeah.
And that was. And Bobby, he went after the mob. Did he go after Hoffa so much?
Yeah.
He set up. I remember this. He set up these illegal wiretaps all over the country. He gave the FBI pretty much carte blanche to go around
Yeah.
and do wiretaps. So
All those illegal wiretaps. And I've read some defense of those guys like Bill Romer and Robert Blakey, who wrote the RICO law,
yeah,
have
the
said,
Title III.
yeah, they testified and they said, well, yeah, they were illegal, but we've got them, we might as well use them. And and then Romer said, well, do we really need probable cause to to do recordings of mob guys? Do we really? We know they're breaking the law. So why do we need? He said, I know civil libertarians are going to jump all over me, but do we really need knowing that they're mob? Isn't that enough? Isn't that a predicated act? There was a definite opinion against these guys in the FBI.
Yeah, I see this is an interesting one. You mentioned a little bit about this before last week. Is the tape in Raymond Patriarcha's office.
Yeah.
And they take people coming to Patriarcha, offer to pay him some money for an introduction to a meeting with Hoffa. So
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy's little foray into wiretapping paid off right away to show
Yeah.
the real depth of connection of the Teamsters Union and organized crime.
Literally had the Get Hoffa squad. It was I don't know, there were 20 or 30 agents just going after, and most of them were lawyers, and that was their sole purpose, because Hoffa Kennedy was still ticked off about the McClellan hearings, so he had guys just going after Hoffa. So you've got Kennedy and Hoover and Anslinger and the DEA all coming after the mob, but
Now, for those who don't know Harry Anslinger, he was this was actually before the formal DEA. This was the old Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and Bill Owsley would always say that if you want to find good mob information before before Appalachian, especially, go to the DEA or the Federal Bureau of Narcotics files, because they really kept a lot of information, and they worked all those old heroin conspiracies starting back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And they documented a lot of stuff on the mob where the FBI wasn't really writing it down, and they weren't really taking a look at it. So that's who Anslinger was.
Yeah, they've got the big mafia book that came out before Appalachian. That just every mob guy they knew who was involved in narcotics around
they laid it out too, didn't they? Don't you have a copy of that?
You know what, I was trying to order one, but actually I did have one. I left it in Virginia. I was trying to order a second.
Yeah, I think Halsey's got it. He said it really lays it out. You look at that and you know why things are the way they are 20 years later.
Yeah. Here's where we can get into the conspiracy, if we want to go down this road. So you've got everybody bearing down on the mob once John Kennedy gets elected. We know that Frank Regano was Hoffa's lawyer. He was also the lawyer to Santo Trafficante and Carlos Marcello. And we know that years after, Regano said that he was with Trafficante and Marcello when Kennedy's death was announced, and they toasted and sort of celebrated. You know, Marcello said, if you want to kill a dog, you don't cut off the tail, you cut off the head. Hoffa said it looks like Bobby Kennedy is just another lawyer. So we know that John Kennedy died. Now, did Hoffa and the mob, were they mixed up in it? I don't know. That depends on where you are on the conspiracy trail. But we'll, sort of leave it there. But that's where Hoffa and the mob fall on the John Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, what's difficult about that is this Jack Ruby thing. If it hadn't been for this Jack Ruby thing, Jack Ruby was a strip club owner from Chicago and had a lot of mob connections, and had moved to Dallas. And to believe that this kind of mob associate strip club owner, who I knew a lot of those guys in Kansas City, they were in every major city. There were strip clubs, and there were usually the owners would have some kind of mob connection, some kind of association. And how that guy took it upon himself to think, that, well, this man killed President Kennedy, I'm going to go kill him just out of nowhere. I mean, those kinds of people don't usually do any
super
kind
patriotic
of altruistic things. I mean, if they're not going to get anything out of it, they're not going to do it. I mean, they just don't. Even to this day, what kind of a club owner do you know that's going to go out and do anything that's going to help mankind? And I think he felt like that he was going to help mankind by killing the man that killed President Kennedy. So it's a strange one. If been anybody else but Jack Ruby or somebody like him, any kind of some construction worker out here, or even some lawyer or doctor that just flipped his wig and went down there with a gun and killed him, there wouldn't be any controversy. That whole conspiracy thing would have died out as far as the mob was concerned.
Yeah.
They had other conspiracy theories going on. It's kind of a crime that just lent itself to conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
when they
absolutely.
killed the guy that did the deed right away like that.
Absolutely. But so in any event, Robert Kennedy was no longer the Attorney General. Maybe the damage had been done to the mob and to Hoffa, but Hoffa continues on as the president. He's got a few charges hanging over his head. But while this is going on, while Hoffa is fighting against Robert Kennedy and everything from about 1961 to 1964, so John Kennedy died in 62, I think 61 or 62.
64. 63. 64. November 64. Kennedy was killed.
Jimmy Hoffa is negotiating the Master Freight Agreement, which was it's an incredible piece of negotiation. Jimmy Hoffa had to go to every local around the country and basically every shipper, and he had to get them all on the same page, and he had to get the members to support it, more or less. And you'll offer this much every day. You'll this much guaranteed pay, this many hours a day guaranteed, and this much holiday pay, and this much overtime. And it sounds, now we come to accept that as, that's just kind of the norm. But back in this time, that was just not done. It was something completely new. And Jimmy basically did it single-handedly, going around the country. That's why it took 3 years to do, 3 or 4 years. And he did it. The mob helped. If he couldn't get a business to sign on, they would slash tires and break windows, burn the place down. If a place totally held out, then they'd burn them down. And if a local wouldn't, if maybe some local president wouldn't go along with it, then Jimmy'd pull him out and put somebody in who would. This was a place where he really used the mob to help him, but it's still politicking and muscling and making deals and everything. It still took Jimmy Hoffa 4 years, but after doing this for as long, he came up with the Master Freight Agreement, which was the first national contract guaranteeing rights for truckers. And this is after they were kicked out of the AFL-CIO. So basically, Jimmy was doing it totally on his own. And this really cemented his reputation amongst the truckers. So they would go anywhere with any firm, and they would get the same rights and the same guarantees. They couldn't be paid less anywhere they went. It was really, really Jimmy's crowning achievement.
And that was a huge difference. You're saying that if you were a Teamster in a dock in Wichita, Kansas, or you're a Teamster on the dock in Kansas City, Missouri, or Detroit, then there was a certain rate of pay that you got for whatever your job classification was, no matter where you live. That's interesting. Now, I'm sure that they'd all negotiated individually across the country, the different locals. They might band together in Kansas City or Detroit, but in Kansas City, probably the people out in western Kansas, like Wichita and Salina, where there might be some Teamsters activity, they would have a different contract than, say, New York City, where the cost of living is a lot higher too. So
you could get more, but you couldn't get less.
I'll be darned.
And that's, and the mob helped him. Like I said, that was a sort of a concession they made. If Jimmy's going to give them, money, and Jimmy's gonna let them steal every third load or whatever deal Jimmy was making, he did it in exchange for their help with this Master Freight Agreement. So you see a lot of this symbiotic relationship, but you don't see too many of the later presidents using the mob to help them with negotiations. But Jimmy really knew how to use power.
It was sometime around this time when he was charged with bribery, and then he had the jury tampering incident. I'm trying to think of what the deal was with that. I see now. He had extorted money from a company, personal money. It was really an extortion charge that for personal money, and he'd gotten an 8-year prison sentence. And he also got a conviction on fraud.
Yeah, there was a jury tampering. There were a lot of charges swirling around Jimmy, but the jury tampering and was really, I want to say the jury tampering was what really got him. He pretty much got away with there was a jury tampering and then there was the extortion. I don't remember the details of it, but he fought against it. He was charged in 1964 or 63 or 64. While all that was going on, he was negotiating the Master Freight, and he continued to appeal over the course of several years. But this time he was also saying, no to the mob and really ticking everybody off.
Yeah, see, now this was down in Nashville, the trucking company.
Yes, right.
That, they funneled a lot of money to Hoffa and they wanted to settle a strike. and then he was being tried for that, and he was acquitted. And then he found out that he bribed a policeman who was
Jury.
married to one of the jurors.
That's
So,
right. Jury team.
Nashville cats there. Huh? So then they actually ended up convicting him of that jury tampering, and he got time for that. They didn't go back with the other case.
Yeah, double jeopardy. Yeah. Unlike with Harry Edelman, where they said there was no jeopardy the first time.
Right. Well, that was or he bribed the judge. I guess that was a little bit different.
But
a little easier to say. That was definitely. There's only one decider on that, and
right.
he paid them off. So in this one, there was 12 deciders, and he only paid off one, and really only paid off her husband. But anyhow, that's when he got his time, and that's when he was away when the mob kind of moved in, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you've got Jimmy, who's already kind of tight with the purse strings, but he goes away finally in 1967, and he said, okay, Alan Dorfman and Bill Presser are going to be in charge of the pension. Fitzsimmons will be the acting president, but I'll oversee everything. He went to the Mafia Row in Lewisburg, and you see that in Goodfellas, and I've heard some guys say, "Oh, prison wasn't really like that," but I've read quite a few books on Mafia Row. Vinnie Teresa was there, and he talks about it that Carmine Galante basically ran the place. John Gotti was there, Carmine Galante, Vinnie Rao, the consigliere, the Lucchese family, Paul Vario, Henry Hill eventually. That's where Tony Provenzano went to jail in 1960. 6, I think. So you really had every major, just all the mob guys. That was where they would be imprisoned in Lewisburg. And everything I read said they ran the place. They had them in a separate location of the prison. They called Mafia Row. And
yeah, I read about that. Of course, we've all seen the Goodfellas, the movie. And they show that. And I talked to a prison guard up at Leavenworth, and he said, well, what we had, and Russell Bufalino and some other guys like that were all in what they called the old man's wing. And he said it was kind of like that. They had money. They could go buy different things at the commissary, and they cooked a lot of their own meals and kept to themselves. And unless you were invited in, then you weren't really part of it. And they left it alone because he told kind of a good story about Bufalino was down in a line. This was after Hoffa disappeared, and he said, hey, he said, Mr. Bufalino, he said, whatever happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Bufalino just gave him a look.
While Jimmy's away, though, that's where they really see the how good they can have it. You've got Dorfman and Presser, who really start building up power, but they do so by giving away a lot of money. And you've got Fitzsimmons, who he really is good at negotiating contracts. He and Roy Lee Williams, that's a strength that they do have. But other than that, Fitz just wants to play golf, and they can do what they want to do. He's not really just like under Jimmy. He's very, very pliable, and he does whatever. So as long as Dorfman and Bill Presser keep writing the checks, and Fitzsimmons stays on the golf course, and Roy Lee Williams has got the support of the rank and file, so that's keeping the men happy. It doesn't really matter what's going on with Jimmy, but what you do see during this time is Provenzano went to prison in '66. His brother did take over that local 560 and was on the executive board shortly thereafter. But this is where control sort of swung away from the Genovese to more of the Midwestern mobs into Chicago with Dorfman and Williams in Kansas City, and Cleveland was sort of connected closely to the Genovese family, but really you had Chicago. Once Tony Provenzano went to prison in '66, his brother was not as strong as Tony Provenzano. So this is where Chicago really takes over greater control of the Union through Alan Dorfman.
You know,
York
I'd
still
always wondered
represents
about that.
Chicago.
How did
Chicago.
Chicago end up being such a big duck compared to the
Yeah,
New York families? It was
yeah.
Fat Tony Salerno, and he was kind of the oversaw Tony Pro, I believe, Tony
Yes.
Provenzano, but he had some connection to that. But they just did not have the stick or the say so or the control in the Teamsters Union that Chicago did. Chicago was the man and the guy, and everybody had to get Chicago's permission. You didn't get anything done with the Teamsters unless Chicago approved of it. I always wondered how that happens. It kind of makes sense. If the East Coast guy gets locked up and there's nobody really to step in, then Chicago's already got Kansas City in its pocket, and Roy Lee
Yeah.
Williams is a powerful Teamster. Now Cleveland has pressure in his pocket, in their pocket, but and Cleveland, is subservient to the Genovese family, but Milwaukee is subservient to Chicago, and they've got a member on the board. So really, Chicago is, that's how they aced him out. And I wondered about that.
Yeah, that's all. Obviously, it's with anything, it's speculation, but that was about the time that and then you got Fitzgerald, who was a Detroit guy, and Hoffa was always a Detroit guy. So that's where you really see that sort of shift in power. Was about the time that Tony Pro went to prison, and so that's kind of my. Sorry, I got to. And then that's where you sort of see things shift. So that's kind of my take on it. Is that's where Chicago, Kansas City, and Cleveland, who also has close ties to Chicago, they sort of shift their power towards the more stronger.
So while Tony Pro and Hoffa in prison at Lewisburg at the same time,
Yeah.
That's when this big falling out they had came, if I remember
Right.
the movie right.
Right. Yeah. They did just very much like the movie. There was a slur. Tony Provenzano was upset about his commission. The movie did get that right, and he did say something about you people or people like you, or there was something that upset Tony Provenzano along those lines, and so you've got Jimmy stepping on Tony Provenzano's feet in prison. He's also really trying to keep control of the mob, and he's got people still. He's trying to control the pension board with some of the people who are still on it, even though Presser and Dorfman are still controlling it. So Jimmy's starting to gum up the works. He's still trying to run things from prison, and that's he's starting to aggravate people. But this is where Fitzsimmons really Fitzsimmons he's not helping Jimmy get out of prison. He's not taking steps. That was kind of what Jimmy wanted. He wanted Fitz to take political steps to get him out of prison, and that's not happening because people are starting to turn on Jimmy. And stepping on the mob's toes with Tony Provenzano was really a bad move.
Now this is kind of where Hoffa became these political connections really bad during this time, and this is when he created this drive. Is that while he was still in the penitentiary, or did he start that just before?
No, that was earlier before he went. He had created the drive program. I should have had the year on there, but the Democrat, Republican, Independent voter education that was set up by Hoffa earlier to create. It was basically a political war chest, and
to make political contributions to support different candidates.
Correct, and basically Hoffa would just take money and put it in there. So every Teamster made, whether they knew it or not, they were making contributions to the drive fund. So that was also worth millions of dollars. And Jimmy would make payoffs or donations to senators and congressmen, and so he lined up political power behind the Teamsters. And that was also, the mob had access to that when Jimmy went to prison. So you've got, like I said, that's another war chest for the mob to make political connections. And once Fitzsimmons comes into power, Jimmy had intended for him to use that drive money to make inroads and to get Jimmy out of prison, basically, to help him out, get a pardon. And Fitz sort of dragged his feet on that, did not help him. And they were not going to make connections during the Johnson administration. But Nixon did want connections to the Teamsters, and he remembered that it was Jimmy who gave him the money. So around the 1970, Nixon starts reaching out to the Teamsters, and he gets in tight with Fitzsimmons. And I think it was Haldeman who reached out to Fitzsimmons, and actually Fitzsimmons starts playing golf with Nixon. They're back and forth playing golf at La Costa, which is built by the Teamsters, and that's where the mob played golf out in San Diego. And the mob sees they've got Fitzsimmons playing golf with the president, so they've got a direct route to the president. They've got all these politicians that are lined up with the Drive Fund. They've got open access to the pension fund. Nobody's hindering them. Nobody's saying no. Why would they want to go back to Jimmy?
Really? Now, that was a particularly good connection that Fitz made with the President of the United States. That's almost amazing, isn't it? And Nixon will use that money. He was famous for, he pioneered this somehow being a Republican, but to get the vote of the working man. I still don't understand to this day, because it's still going on to this day. How does a Republican get all these union guys to vote for him, where historically the Democrats are the ones that will sponsor legislation that is friendly to labor unions and benefits and all that? But somehow they've done it. Nixon did it kind of with the anti-war thing. He kind of used the macho-ness of the labor unions to get on board against those weak-willed, pussy anti-war people who were afraid to go to serve in the army, and kind of use that as a wedge. And they're still doing it. Republicans are still doing it today. And I'm not making a political comment one way or the other. That's just the way it is. That's just how it's worked. Because it just doesn't make sense that a labor union would support a Republican. It never made sense to me.
I think after Bobby Kennedy too, that kind of left a bad taste in it.
Yeah, he soured him. But he wasn't really against the labor union as such. He was against the mob control of labor unions. He was trying to do them a favor, but somehow they turned that the labor management of the labor union turned that against the Democrats, and made everybody feel like that the Democrats were going against them, when all they were going against, Bobby Kennedy was going against, was the mob influence. But that's enough politics, I guess, for this particular one. We don't get too far down that path. Canvas has always confused me why all these labor unions will support the Republican candidate for president, or any Republican for office, but that's just me.
You're going to see it later with Jackie Presser too.
Yeah. So where we at? Hoffa has resigned from the presidency. He's been in prison, but I believe as Nixon is the one that got him out, they made kind of a deal with the devil to get him out, didn't they?
Yeah, Hoffa finally agreed to resign in '71 while he's in prison. Fitz was the acting president, but he becomes the actual president. And so Hoffa basically loses total control of the unions. And so he's using his people to block pension funds and all. But finally, Fitzsimmons does agree to get Jimmy out of prison. And I think that the hope was that if we get Jimmy out of prison, he'll stop using his last connections to block everything, to block pension funds. If we just get him out, let him retire, we can just neutralize him. And so part of getting Jimmy out of prison was Fitzsimmons asked the White House get him out, but in doing so, maybe ban him from the union until the 80s or so, but for 5 years. Just we'll put him on the shelf, as the mob would say. And so we know that FBI informants were aware of a $500,000 in cash raised by Anthony Provenzano and the Genovese family, and another $500,000 were put together by Alan Dorfman and the Chicago outfit. So this is $1 million that was put together, and this is based on this is information I've seen in a much better researched source than mine. So this is $1 million put together between the Genovese and the Chicago outfit. It was put together and delivered to, and I know that it's in the Irishman, but this is based on a real source that I got this from. And it was put together and delivered to Nixon. And Nixon's tapes talk about $1 million in cash that he's able to receive. The recordings of Nixon's White House that he recorded of himself. So Nixon receives this $1 million. Jimmy gets a pardon and is removed, and he gets out of prison. But as part of that, and as part of this deal made with Fitz, he is banned from participating in the Teamsters for 5 years. So Jimmy's out, but the mob has finally kicked him out of the Teamsters totally. He's done. He can't participate even out of prison. He's basically been cut off, and Jimmy is furious, totally apoplectic, just beside himself that his union that he created has been taken away from him.
Yeah, so, and you know, the rank and file would have still supported Jimmy.
Yes.
He could have still gone to the rank and file, even though he's not supposed to be doing anything. He could have still gone to the rank and file. I don't know.
And he did.
But he signed an agreement, but it wasn't like he was on parole where they could bounce him back in the penitentiary. Right. It was a pardon. And so Nixon can't go say, oh, you didn't stay out of the Teamsters business, so we're going to bounce you back into the penitentiary. So, I'm sure he kept making moves because he was not going to give that up. I'm sure of that. Now he's put his whole life, every fiber of his being as a Teamster into this, and now they expect him to stay out of Teamster business. I don't think so.
Right.
I did notice that, that you pointed out that during this time, Fitzsimmons, he had Roy Lee Williams kind of on his side, and Roy Lee Williams was owned by the Kansas City mob, and Kansas City would have talked to Chicago, and they would have all agreed that Roy Lee Williams needs to stay on Fitz's side and not support any return by Hoffa. I'm sure of that. They had to have done that. I don't know if your research found that, but it just makes sense. And Roy Lee Williams, kind of like Alan Dorfman, they were both war heroes out of World War II. And most of your Teamsters were World War II vets.
Yeah.
And so they were like a man's man, both of them, and especially Williams, because he'd have come up through the Teamsters union. He didn't come up because his father was a Teamster like Dorfman. He came up through being a truck driver. And so he had immensely respect by Teamsters, the rank and file Teamsters. So he could kind of help fend off that any Hoffa moves through the rank and file for a while.
Exactly. He was with Roy Lee Williams. They were able to, like you said, they had the rank and file. He was the only guy aside from Jimmy Hoffa who could really get the men behind him. Hoffa was very popular with the men. Fitzsimmons not so much. Guys like Bill Presser and Alan Dorfman maybe not so much. But Roy Lee Williams was really highly regarded, and the men knew who he was and knew that he was in the trenches with them, and he had been in the trenches with them both in the war and in the cab. And he was really, really well regarded, and that really counted for a lot. The optics of that were very important.
So we're up to the early 70s now.
Yeah.
And probably let's come back next time and start talking about the Teamsters and the Skim in Las Vegas and what went on in the 70s and kind of to the beginning of the end, is also then Hoffa's fight to get back into the saddle, shall we say, with the Teamsters and take an active part. That's an interesting story in itself.
Right.
All right, Cam, it's been great, and folks, we will bring you the probably the third and final episode, don't you think, Cam? We'll do this in one more
Yeah,
episode.
I think we can sprint through. We'll probably sprint through and knock the rest of it out.
It's a pretty good story. It's a big one, though.
Yeah.
I guess the Pizza Connection was last time we did one of these big stories.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Cam. Talk to you later.
All right, bud.